Oriental popular prints, depictions of the floating world, or ukiyo-e, are particularly important in helping to shape modern art as it develops in Europe. So we're going to take a look first at Oriental popular prints before we go to Impressionism. In the Edo period, the shoguns, basically the military rulers of Japan, closed Japan to the outside world. However, in 1853, Matthew Perry, a commander of the fleet that the United States sent to Japan, used that fleet to force Japan to open to the West for commercial purposes. As a result of this encounter with the West, a lot of artwork, particularly in the shape of Oriental popular prints, will flood into Europe and also to the United States. This is important because it's the first time that non-Western art influences the West. This is figure 34-1 in our textbook. It's an example that I would like you to know. Don't worry about the names of Oriental popular print artists. I would like you to know the general characteristics of the printmakers overall so that it would be easy to talk about any Oriental popular print that you happen to encounter. Oriental popular prints in terms of style tend to be colorful with flat areas of color and often contain decorative patterns so that they're, I'm going to say, pleasant to look at. They are also very linear, and that means that we emphasize line. If we go over here to the detail, we can see the importance of outline in shaping the figures. They tend also, generally speaking, to be asymmetrical. That would make them informal. They also often look like there's something cut off at the edges, the way in which we would crop a photograph. And in fact, these have compositionally much that could be shared with photography. The subject matter is important because it is ordinary folks doing ordinary things, engaged, in fact, in mundane activities. Here we see two women. One lady appears to be, I think, probably drying from a bath as she dresses, and the other lady is assisting her. But in an instant in time, the one woman turns because she hears, and if we go down to the title of this, the evening bell on the clock ringing. So it is an instant in time when a ordinary person doing ordinary duties or work stops to hear a sound. It's this emphasis on ordinary people engaged in daily activities that will become so influential when Western artists begin to see these works. Many of these works also were done in a series. That means more than one image created on the same topic. If we go back to the title of this, it continues. It's drawn from 8 views, not just one, not just two, but 8 views of the parlor. In other words, inside the home of these individuals. So it was done as one image in a series. That's going to be really important to the Impressionists. A number of these pieces also engage in the use of empty spaces. That would be true back here. And the use of diagonals to pull us into the distance, to give us a sense of depth. Japanese artists are not relying on Western forms of perspective, but on intuitive perspective, which is provided through the use of diagonal lines to suggest movement into the distance. Here are two more to look at, including the one on the left, which is figure 34-14 in our textbook, which is Plum Estate. It features a very famous tree. It's a park. It's a place of enjoyment and pleasure where people could go and enjoy, again, I'm going to say, aspects of the floating world, a place of temporary pleasure, a place of enjoyment. This is also a place where ordinary people go, and in this case, they go to enjoy the flowering tree and the blossoms that appear on the tree. It too has been cut off. It's been abstracted. We have flat, relatively flat areas of color, and the image is highly decorative. This one, of course, is The Great Wave, a highly respected and very famous Oriental popular print. It too is from a series of 36 views of Mount Fuji, and you can find Mount Fuji tucked in the background. You can see that the artist has engaged in a decorative play of dark blue and light blue and white. The mountain is snow-capped, white-capped, just as the waves are white-capped as well. This is a nice example of an asymmetrical Oriental popular print, a great sweeping curve of this giant wave with all of its energy and kind of stylized fingers breaking downward as the water falls below. That curving line is echoed in the additional curving lines that are incorporated in this. And this great wave right here, this lesser great wave, actually echoes the shape of Mount Fuji behind. Tucked in between the waves, you can find two, I'm going to say fishing vessels perhaps, but vessels complete with people on them. So again, ordinary people, this time caught in the presence of the great wave. In response to realism and the invention of photography, both appearing in the first half of the 19th century, plus the arrival of Oriental popular prints in the second half of the 19th century, we arrive at our first truly modern style, and that modern style will be Impressionism. The question really is, why does it happen then? And we think the answer is due to the French Revolution, which in turn was due to the Enlightenment. The changes take place because the French Revolution causes new patrons to come to the foreground. Those new patrons, and patrons are people who buy works of art, these new patrons will be from the middle class. The royals have essentially been replaced, and along with them, the wealthy in the church have been replaced by a new rising, newly important middle class. To meet the demands of the middle class, we also create as artists new subject matter that derives from the middle class. So now you can see why Oriental popular prints with ordinary people in them would be so attractive to people in Europe. All of this gives artists new artistic freedom because they're no longer working on commission or with the court or with the church. They can sell their art to us directly. How do they do that? They do it through galleries, and that's the system that we're still using today. An artist then can set his own artistic problem and allow for his own handwriting to become visible. There is no better example of that than the work that's created by the Impressionists, who will come together in the year 1863 for a kind of joint exhibition of their work, which will officially break with the French Academy, which was the traditional old guard approach to painting. One of the leaders of this new art style is a man whose name is Edward Manet. The painting that we're looking at right now, Luncheon on the Grass, is one of his most famous, perhaps I should say infamous, because it caused a great scandal when it was exhibited. But it is a piece that was in this exhibition, the Salon des Refuses, which took place in 1863. So it's kind of a landmark painting. Despite the fact that this picture was actually based upon a Renaissance painting, and I think you can see the triangle here, and a very traditional inclusion of a still life element, the painting itself was nevertheless pretty shocking to the French public in the 19th century. And part of the reason for that is this woman located right here, who is in the nude. She is seated with two men in what appears to be a picnic. They seem to be totally oblivious to the fact that she's in the nude, and she looks directly at us, confronting us almost as if to say, "Hey, honey, what's your problem?" At the same time, in the background, right back here, there's actually a woman who is bathing or taking a swim or playing in the water, and she's dressed. So, what Manet has given us is a painting that is illogical and also confrontational. And it did cause an uproar, particularly the nude woman, who was viewed by the French public as inappropriate and immoral. proper. In addition to that, however, the public was also upset at the painting style because Manet began to show his brushwork and to create suggested form in the picture. This is a closer look in the lower right at that detail of the still life. You can see that the paint is laid on very thickly on the surface with suggested form. The artist is also in the detail of the woman who scrutinizes us, eliminating a contrast of light versus dark so that the form is actually flattening out. These are elements that will ultimately develop into Impressionism. This is also a landmark painting because it rejects traditional imagery found in mythology or history painting, such as the Rococo picture on our left, which is a depiction of Cupid. It looks as if it comes from a distant time and place. Manet's picture, though, looks like he's painting real people, people you can actually meet on the street. In other words, painting members of the middle class. This picture by Manet was created about 20 years later, and it is an example of fully formed Impressionism. Its title is Barre the Folies Bergère. It is 28:1 in our textbook, and it shows the artist recording an instant in time, which is one of the features of Impressionism. He captures a woman perhaps lost in thought, at a cabaret, a place where people go, ordinary people like you and me would go for entertainment, and also, as you can see, to eat and to drink. The artist dissolves the form by focusing on light as it hits the surface of objects. So he's particularly taken by reflective surfaces. And it has been suggested, this is another one of Manet's, I'm going to call it a game that he's playing with the viewer because it's difficult to interpret this painting, but it has been suggested that there is a mirror behind the woman so that everything that we're seeing in theory may represent reflected imagery, reflected light on the surface of the mirror. This is a detail of the face of the woman, and I've placed it next to a detail of a portrait by Ingres, the great neoclassical portrait painter that we've already taken a look at in Gardner. You can see in the Ingres that there is no visible brushwork. Everything is immaculate and clear and three-dimensional. In contrast, if you look at the image painted by Manet, you can see where the brush tracks are. You can actually see that there's a line running down the nose of the woman. The artist isn't blending paint any longer. He's leaving his visible brushwork, his signature, on the surface of the canvas. As a result of this, the forms are flattening out and there is an accent or emphasis on the surface of the painted image. This is another detail of the composition, which again suggests the forms rather than delineates the forms, as the artist clearly seeks out subject matter, which allows us to see the surface reflections that light is creating. I'd like to show us a detail, in fact, of a couple of these pieces. Let's take a look here. You can see the way he's selected a glass container for the oranges, and on that glass container there are light reflections that literally add to dissolving the form. The same is going to be true for the bottles over here. Even better though, take a look at this. This glass, the artist has focused exclusively on light reflecting on the glass itself and on the surface of the water on the inside of the glass. Look at what he's done with the petals of the flowers. This is the brushwork of Manet that remains visible. Very suggested form, not actually delineated. The image top right is by a contemporary American painter working at the same time who has given us very solid, very well crafted forms. And it's this tradition that we really have to judge Manet's work against to see the innovations in his style by suggesting and recording light on the surface of objects at an instant in time. This does flatten form, but it also gives us permanent record of a fleeting instant and the reflections of light in that instant.